Every great story begins with doubt. Every champion once stood in the shadow of disbelief. And on this night, under the bright lights of destiny, doubt hung heavy in the air. It was a semi-final, the war before the glory, the stage where greatness either ascends or disappears. On one side stood a machine of football perfection, polished, confident, untouchable. On the other, a group dismissed by experts, mocked by media, and ignored by nearly everyone except themselves. But football doesn't read scripts. It writes them in chaos and courage. The stadium pulsed like a living heart. Red and blue lights painted the night sky. It wasn't just a game. It was prophecy in motion, and the world thought it already knew the ending. Yet deep within the tunnel, something stirred. The underdogs stood shoulder to shoulder, silent, still, but burning inside. They had heard it all, the doubts, the insults, the laughter. They carried those words like fuel. Every step toward the pitch was an answer to every voice that ever said they couldn't. The favorites marched out with swagger, calm, clinical, certain. The blue side emerged with purpose, eyes locked forward. Every breath a vow. No fear, no fantasy, just fire. The whistle hadn't even blown, but the war had already begun. When it finally did, the noise shattered the silence. The pitch erupted into chaos. Passes cutting like blades, tackles echoing like thunder. The Giants pushed forward, attacking in waves, confident that class would crush courage. But courage didn't crumble. The blue wall rose, strong and unyielding. Every interception was a roar of defiance. Every clearance, a declaration. Moments stretched into belief. The favorites still danced with the ball, but their rhythm began to falter. The underdogs were matching them, stride for stride, heart for heart. By halftime, the scoreboard didn't tell the story. The looks on faces did. The world was still certain of the outcome, but the blue team wasn't listening anymore. They had found something deeper, belief that couldn't be coached, courage that couldn't be broken. And as they walked back into the tunnel, heads high, the whispers began to spread. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't over. The calm was gone. The storm had arrived. Because on this night, they weren't chasing glory. They were rewriting destiny. The second half wasn't football anymore. It was war, a battle fought not with weapons, but with lungs, hearts, and courage. Every second felt heavier than the last. The Giants surged forward, wave after wave, believing the wall would finally crumble. But the wall refused. Every pass from the opposition came faster, sharper, more desperate, but so did the response. It wasn't tactics now. It was instinct. It was sacrifice. It was the pure will to endure, down to fewer numbers, surrounded on all sides, pressed by thousands of voices that screamed for surrender. They stood tall. Bodies crashed. Boots collided. Lungs screamed for air. But belief burned stronger than pain. Every interception was a victory. Every clearance a breath of life. When legs gave out, hearts carried on. When fear crept in, faith silenced it. The commentators called it desperate. But desperation, when fueled by purpose, becomes art. The air inside the stadium vibrated. Chants clashed with whistles. Fury met defiance. And yet, in the middle of that chaos, there was stillness. The kind of stillness only warriors feel when everything depends on the next second. Eyes darted, muscles tensed, lungs burned, time slowed to a crawl. You could see the sweat, the grit, the quiet conversations between exhausted teammates. One look that said, "Hold on, just hold on." The scoreboard told one story, but the truth was written on the grass, carved in tackles and bruises, in the unspoken promise that they would not break. The crowd began to sense it. Something was changing. The Giants, once dominant, looked frustrated. Their rhythm faltered. Their arrogance cracked. And slowly, disbelief began to spread. The underdogs, those dismissed by the world, were not just surviving. They were dictating destiny through defiance. When the storm raged its hardest, they didn't retreat. They advanced in spirit. One block became two. One roar became 10,000. Fans watching from every corner of the globe could feel it, that primal heartbeat of resistance. Because this wasn't just football anymore. It was something greater. Football, in its purest form, isn't about elegance. It's about endurance. It's about that invisible power inside you that whispers, keep going, when logic says it's over. And on that night, the underdogs weren't defending a scoreline. They were defending belief itself. The belief that courage can rewrite fate. As the final minutes crawled by, the Giants threw everything forward. Hope, pride, chaos. But the wall stood firm. Cracked, trembling, unbroken. Then came the whistle. No cheers, no noise, just disbelief. The impossible had happened. What was meant to be a coronation had turned into a rebellion. And as the blue shirts collapsed to the turf, drenched, exhausted, immortal, they didn't just win a game. They conquered doubt. They conquered destiny. They conquered belief itself. Long after the final whistle, the echoes remained, not in the stadium, but in the hearts of millions, the kind of silence that hums louder than sound itself. What the world had witnessed wasn't just football. It was defiance. It was belief, forged in fire and disbelief, shining brighter than logic. They said it couldn't be done. They said the gulf was too wide, the mountain too high, the dream too impossible. But that night, that unforgettable night, football reminded everyone why we watch. Because in 90 minutes, the impossible can kneel before courage. Across the planet, from Lagos to London, from Sao Paulo to Seoul, people rose from their seats in awe. Some cheered, some cried, others just stared, shaking their heads in silence, trying to process what they had just seen. For one night, humanity was united, not by color, not by crest, but by wonder, because the blue team didn't just win. They endured. They believed. They refused to accept the story written for them. In that moment, they stopped being underdogs. They became symbols, proof that greatness isn't measured in possession or power, but in heart. Proof that sometimes resistance is the most beautiful form of victory. In newsrooms and studios across the world, analysts replayed it again and again. Formations were drawn, tactics dissected, statistics compared, but none of it explained this. Because what happened that night couldn't be graphed or calculated. It had to be felt. The press called it luck. The people called it destiny. But deep down, everyone knew this was more than sport. This was spirit taking shape on a field of grass. Even the defeated, in their quiet reflection, understood. They hadn't just lost a game. They had faced a force that numbers can't define, belief that doesn't bend, faith that doesn't break. Years later, fans would still talk about it in hushed tones. Do you remember that night? The night when the Giants stumbled. The night when the underestimated rose. The night the world stood still. For the favorites, it became a warning. For the believers, it became a legend. And for everyone watching, it became hope. Proof that no matter the odds, no story is finished until the last second has passed. As the lights dimmed and the players vanished down the tunnel, the air still vibrated with something timeless. A reminder that passion, when tested, can defy even destiny itself. Because when brilliance meets belief, sometimes belief wins. And when it does, the world remembers. That was the night that shocked the world. That was the night football became eternal.